Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings Benny's Bats edition for Wednesday. What do we got here? May 18th. It's a 12-game night slate that we're going to be talking about tonight. There are a couple games starting in the afternoon, but we're not going to get into those. The idea of our Benny's Bats section here, we try to look at each pitcher that's on the mound today, try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bats profile to do the best against them. So let's start right at the top. We got Atlanta going up against Pittsburgh. Francisco Liriano's pitching for Pittsburgh. Right-handed bats have been the way to go after him. They got about a 274 average this year, and he's given up 8 home runs and only 30 innings of work to them. The problem is that this Braves team is really, really bad. They have one of the lowest ISO numbers ever. They have some of the least amount of home runs to this point of the season. The highest WOBA on the team against left-handed pitching actually belongs to a left-handed bat in Freddie Freeman, whose WOBA is only 322, which is pretty low. The highest ISO score they have on the team is actually Kelly Johnson, and his ISO score is only 143, which, again, is pretty low. So you look at the numbers for this Braves team. WRC+, they're in last place. They got a decent strikeout percentage, not the greatest in the league, but also, not really low either. They don't score any runs. They don't hit any home runs. They aren't putting the ball in play all that often. I mean, no matter what metrics you look at, the Braves here are towards the bottom. So there's not a single bat in this Braves team I want to take, and I do think Francisco Liriano's in a pretty good spot. On the other side of this game, we got Julio Teheran. Left-handed bats last year hit over 300 against them with a home run every 5 innings. They're only hitting about 250 against them this year, but they're still hitting about 1 home run every 5 innings. So left-handed bat's really the way you want to go after them. You're looking at this Pittsburgh team, Gregory Polanco has been moved up to the 3-hole right now. So he's definitely somebody I want to look at. Left-handed bat, absolutely on fire lately. This guy's getting hits. He's stealing bases. He's scoring runs. He's getting a couple RBIs from his new spot in the 3-hole. So I definitely think that he's a little bit underpriced and definitely a good option to look at today. Left-handed bat-wise, you could also look at a guy like John Jaso. He's been leading off for him, 350 WOBA, 168 ISO score, so he's not a bad option either. And then Andrew McCutchen is the one right-handed bat that I want as well. 369 WOBA, 199 ISO. He's 5 for 12 lifetime against Teheran with 2 home runs already. So those are some pretty solid stats that he has. And if I'm looking to use anybody on Pittsburgh, those are the 3 guys that I definitely want to have some exposure to. Remember, this Pittsburgh team went nuts last night, put up double-digit runs, so I do think they're in a good spot. This offense is hitting well and playing really well at the time. Next game we can talk about, we got Seattle against Baltimore. Chris Tillman is pitching for Baltimore. Left-handed bats had a higher average against him the last couple years, but he had a higher home run rate to right-handed bats, although left-handed bats had a pretty decent home run rate too. With that being said, he's actually been really good to start 2016 this year. The 2 guys who I think I want to go after are guys that have some home run power. So Robinson Cano is at the top of the list, 369 WOBA, 207 ISO. He's 14 for 31 lifetime against Tillman. It's like a 430-something batting average, and he has 2 home runs. So if you're a big BBP guy, 31 is a pretty big sample size, 14 hits and 31 at-bats with 2 home runs. That's some pretty good stuff. So I do like Cano a lot here against Tillman. I also like Nelson Cruz. We like him better against lefties, but even against righties, 365 WOBA, 225 ISO score. He's only 2 for 11 lifetime against Tillman, but both of those hits have been home runs. So if you're looking for an upside play for a tournament, I think you can put Cano and Cruz together and, kind of mini stack that game, maybe throw in like a Seager or a Seth Smith, some of the left-handed bats that are batting in front and behind those guys. I think that makes a little bit of sense to go up and attack Tillman. Baltimore is a good hitter's ballpark, so I do expect Seattle to put up a couple runs here today. On the other side, we got Taijuan Walker for Seattle. He's usually much better at home, so I'm a little nervous about him being on the road here today, especially with the negative park switch. Seattle's a very good pitcher's park. Baltimore's a really good hitter's park, and Baltimore lineup has some hitters. Left-handed bats usually have a higher average and more home runs against them. So I think Chris Davis is firmly in play today. 412 WOBA, 343 ISO, huge numbers against right-hand pitching. And then I also think, excuse me, I also think we can look at Manny Machado. 396 WOBA, 258 ISO. He hits very well in righty-on-righty situations. So those are the 2 guys that are kind of standing out to me as the 2 guys I want the most exposure to on Baltimore. Next game we can look at, we got Tampa Bay at Toronto. Jake Odorizzi pitching for Tampa Bay. The last 3 years, he's been kind of a reverse splits guy, which isn't really good in this matchup. That means that right-handed bats have kind of hit him for a higher average. You got guys like Josh Donaldson, 380 WOBA, 250 ISO, Edwin Encarnacion, 377 WOBA, 267 ISO. Like I said, this team isn't the same as they were last year. Last year, this offense was just putting up ridiculous amounts of runs and just absolutely murdering pitching. This year, they're okay. They're not great. They're okay. So I don't think you have to be so afraid of them. I mean, Chris Archer went out yesterday after struggling for a good part of the early season and put up a really, really good start against them. And, like I said, it's not the same kind of offense. You look down at the bottom, the guys that they have in the 7, 8, 9 hole aren't as good as the guys they had last year. Even the guys they have hitting in front of guys like, Batista and Encarnacion and Donaldson, and the guys hitting behind them aren't producing like they did last year. So I don't think you need to be afraid of this offense, but I also don't really want to pick on it. The left-handed bats are in play here too. So maybe a guy like Justin Smoke, who's been hitting fifth, or a guy like Michael Saunders, who's been hitting first or fifth in this lineup. I think you can put some of those lefties together with some of these big righties that hit righty as well. But again, I think there's some softer spots. Odorizzi is very up and down. This is the kind of game where I might have a stack of the Blue Jays if I'm playing in a tournament, and then I might also have a lineup where I take Odorizzi on a different lineup because, I could see it kind of going either way. On the mound for Toronto is Dickey, and Dickey has not been good this year. We usually like to look at BVP to see which guys have hit the knuckleball well, and there's not a ton of history that we have here on this Tampa Bay team. Steven Souza is 3 for 8 against Dickey with a home run, so I guess he's someone we can consider. Evan Longoria, 12 of 46 with 2 home runs, so that's not great, about a 250 batting average, but he does have a little bit of pop against him, so maybe that's someone you can look at. And then Brandon Guyer is 3 of 12 against him. He's been leading off ever since Evan Longoria got hurt, so just a couple options that we can look at. I'm not a huge fan of R.A. Dickey, but I don't know if I'm going to be picking on him today because I just don't see a lot that stands out on that Tampa team. Next game we can look at, we got Cleveland going up against Cincinnati. We got the rookie Brandon Finnegan pitching for Cincinnati, and right-handed bats don't have the highest batting average in the world against them, but they have been knocking out home runs against them. So that's really what you want to look for is, some right-handed guys that have a little bit of power. I think that makes Mike Napoli a decent play today. 393 WOBA, 262 ISO, has always hit left-handed pitching really well, and he is one of those guys that has some power, batting usually in the cleanup spot for this order. He's definitely somebody I think we should look at. Also like Francisco Lindor a little bit. 389 WOBA, 184 ISO. Shortstop's never an easy position to fill. He's got a little bit of pop, not a lot, but he is a nice big right-handed bat going up against a left-handed pitcher. So I think he'll have a pretty decent game today as well. On the other side, we got Mike Clevinger, who's making his first start for Cleveland. He's making his Major League Baseball debut. I was looking at his numbers in AAA. Right-handed bats hit 214 against them with a 102 whip, only gave up 4 home runs in 88 innings. Left-handed bats hit 223 against them with a 1.11 whip and only 4 home runs in 69 innings. So those are some really good numbers that this kid has. Again, those are numbers that he put up in the minors in AAA. So, we don't know exactly how that's going to translate to the majors. It's a whole different ballgame. I do think you want to look at a guy like Joey Votto, though. Against right-handed pitching, 406 WOBA, 222 ISO. He gets on base, very, very good hitter. And then the other guy who's been on fire for the Cincinnati team is actually Adam Duvall. He's been hitting in the 5 or 6 hole. I hope they start moving him up in the lineup a little bit because, honestly, he's been their best hitter after Votto so far. 387 WOBA, 346 ISO in the early going for him. So, like I said, this Clevinger kid's supposed to be a pretty solid prospect. He's got some really, really good numbers in AAA. He's one of the top prospects that they had. I think he was actually part of a big trade that they made recently. I forget exactly who it was, but he came over like a year or two ago, and whatever their last big trade was. Expecting a lot out of him, so this should be a pretty decent start. But again, I like to take a wait-and-see approach with a lot of these first-time starters because, guys like Berrios and Manaea, these guys were studs, and they got lit up in their first start in the majors. So I don't really think he's somebody that you want to use. Next game we can talk about, we got Washington going up against the New York Mets. Bartolo Colon is on the mound for the Mets. Left-handed bats do better against him. They have a higher home run rate. The 2 guys that really stand out are going to be Harper and Murphy. Harper, 468 WOBA, 352 ISO, 3 of 13 lifetime against Bartolo with the home run. And then we got Daniel Murphy, 366 WOBA, 203 ISO. They finally moved him up to the 4 spot, so he's the guy that's now giving protection to Harper, especially against right-handed pitching. And I really like that when teams start a right-hander, because if you're going to walk Harper, Murphy's been doing damage lately, so it makes you think twice about whether or not you want to pitch to Harper. And the biggest problem I have with Harper right now is he's not getting pitched to. If they don't pitch to him and he just winds up with 2 or 3 walks and maybe only 1 at bat to do something, and to actually swing and do something in the game, he's not going to be able to get you the fantasy points that you want. But the flip side of that coin is also, Daniel Murphy gets up with runners on base every single time if they keep walking, Bryce Harper, and he's hitting behind them. So I do think it bumps Murphy up a little bit, although his price is up a little bit too. So you're not getting him at the, 3,800 to 4,200 range that we were getting him at earlier in the season. Now you're paying a premium at $45 to, $5,000, depending on the matchup. For Washington, we got Gio Gonzalez pitching. Gio's a lefty. Right-handed bats have a higher average against him, but this is a guy that doesn't give up a lot of home runs to either side of the plate. Looking at this Mets lineup, we don't really have a lot of big right-handed bats that you're afraid of. David Wright is the guy who has the best numbers against left-handed pitching. 396 WOBA, 203 ISO since the start of 2015. He's 6 of 21 lifetime with 3 extra base hits against Gio, so he actually has done some damage and put up some decent numbers. But after that, you go to probably Yoenis Cespedes being their second best hitter, and he's actually better in righty-on-righty situations. He's a 348 WOBA, 238 ISO score against left-handed pitching. He's 2 for 4 lifetime against Gio, though, so maybe this is a pretty decent spot for him. But outside of those two, I'm not really looking at the lefties. Gio's kind of tough on the lefties, so guys like Grandy, guys like Conforto, guys like Duda, not really high up on my radar today. Next game we can look at Chicago Cubs at the Milwaukee Brewers. You got John Lackey on the mound for the Cubs, and he's been real solid 2016. ERA a little bit above 3. He's got a whip of only 0.97, and Milwaukee has been really bad against right-handed pitching. I guess you can look at a guy like Scooter Gennett if he's up there towards the top of the order, but, it's more just a salary-saving option there. Ryan Braun's the guy with the best numbers, 364 WOBA, 203 ISO. He's always dangerous. He can always get into one and take somebody deep. The game is in Milwaukee, really good hitter's ballpark, but I think this is probably a pretty good spot here for John Lackey. I expect him to have a pretty good game. On the other side of this game, we got Slippin' Jimmy Nelson. 2015 left-handed bats hit over 300 against them, 168 whip, 11 home runs in 72 innings. So I think you want to look at the lefties. Rizzo's the guy that stands out the most to me, 399 WOBA, 278 ISO, power hitter's ballpark. I think he could be one of those guys that we look at for a home run today. Guys like Fowler, Zobrist, Hayward, all these guys are in play. I don't think that this Milwaukee pitching staff is going to keep throwing up zeros against the Cubs. Chase Anderson pitched a great game last night, took a no-hitter into the 7th inning. But again, I don't think you're going to keep this Cubs offense down for too long. They have a plus-minus right now over 100, which is absurd for this point in the season. This is an offense that's really, really banging it out, and they've been getting good pitching as well. So I definitely think that, the Cubs are going to wake up a little bit here today. Next game we can look at, we got Houston at Chicago White Sox. Doug Fister is on the mound for Houston, and left-handed bats have a higher average, higher home run rate against them, but right-handed bats have been okay too, so it's not like we have to shy away from them. I think you can look at a guy like Adam Eaton, leading off, 363 WOBA, 168 ISO. He definitely makes some sense. A guy like Jose Abreu, 373 WOBA, 227 ISO. He does have that upside power, and he is somebody who hits well in righty-on-righty situations. So I really like Abreu, really like Eaton. I think both of them are in a pretty good spot here against Fister. On the other side of the game, we got Matt Latos. Left-handed better against him. Whip of 1.42, although the batting average is a tad bit low. But he has given up 3 home runs already in 18 innings pitched to them this season. Do you want to look at guys like Colby Rasmus or Valbuena or maybe a Castro? If you do, those are the guys that probably profile the best. The guy with the best numbers is Correa with the 366 WOBA, 214 ISO score. I honestly don't think this is a horrendous spot here for Latos. I'm not rolling him out there, but I'm also not really looking to take a lot of bats against him. I don't think this is the best game to target, so I probably won't have a lot of exposure to Astros bats here today. Next game, we can talk about Boston at Kansas City. David Price is on the mound for Boston. It's been very tough on left-handed bats. Right-handed bats have been the way to go after him the last 2 years. The only guy that really stands out to me is Lorenzo Cain, 409 WOBA, 238 ISO, 4 of 11 lifetime against David Price with a home run. So I definitely think he's somebody you want to have some exposure to here today. On the other side of this game, we got Edinson Volquez. Right-handed bats have a higher average against him the last 2 years, so a little bit of a reverse splits things working. But I think left-handed bats are fine as well. The two guys who profile the best are David Ortiz and Travis Shaw. Ortiz is a 427 WOBA, 342 ISO guy. Shaw is a 371 WOBA, 207 ISO. Both of these guys are hitting right-handed pitching extremely well. Kansas City's not the greatest hitter's ballpark altogether, and this Boston team didn't look all that great yesterday against Yordano Ventura, which was surprising because Ventura hadn't been good up to this point in the season, but I guess he had a pretty good game yesterday. If I was looking at any right-handed bats against him today, I think Mookie Betts would be the guy that I want. Mookie Betts 2 for 6 lifetime already against Volquez with the home run. Hitting at the top of that Boston order. He's been pretty hot lately. So he's the one guy that's up there. His price is so expensive that I feel like people just don't pay up for him. But if you look at his game logs, this is a guy that's been putting up some really good numbers. So I think Mookie Betts is definitely somebody that's going to make a couple of my rosters today. Colorado at St. Louis. Next game we can look at. Adam Wainwright's on the mound for St. Louis. His 2016 has been horrible. Right and left-handed bats are hitting over 325 against him. He hasn't been able to shut anybody down. He hasn't been able to get anybody out from either side of the plate, really. So I do think everybody's in play. I like guys like Cargo, 409 WOBA, 304 ISO against right-handed pitching. Arenado, 386 WOBA, 306 ISO against right-handed pitching. Even a Trevor Story, who's actually hitting righties pretty well, 367 WOBA, 314 ISO score. I think all these guys are going to be viable options to go up against Wainwright today. On the other side of this game, we got Chad Russin, right-handed bats, hitting over 300 against him this year with a high home run rate. A guy like Steven Piscotty, definitely in play for me, 423 WOBA, 229 ISO. You also got guys like Almeides Diaz and Hazel Baker if they make it into the lineup. 380 plus WOBA for the two of those guys. The meat of this St. Louis team actually didn't hit left-handed pitching all that well last year, so I don't think this is a soft spot for him. Outside of Piscotty as a one-off, I don't know how many guys on the Cardinals I'm going to have any exposure to today. Excuse me. Next game we can look at New York Yankees going up against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Nathan Eovaldi on the mound for the Yankees. Left-handed bats over the last 2 years are hitting over 300 against them. Right-handed bats are about a 250. So I think Jake Lamb is a guy who stands out. Batting cleanup lately, 343 WOBA, 168 ISO. Also think we can look at Paul Goldschmidt here, 400 WOBA, 245 ISO. And then on the other side of the game, we got Shelby Miller. Left-handed bats have been better against him, but he's actually been getting shelled by everybody this year. If you want to stack up the Yankees, I don't think it's a horrible idea. It's a good hitter's ballpark against a pitcher that's been giving it up lately. The guys who stand out on the numbers, you got Teixeira, 368 ISO, 292 WOBA, 368 WOBA, 292 ISO since the beginning of 2015, although he's really struggling to start 2016. You got Carlos Beltran, who's actually been hitting pretty well lately, 353 WOBA, 209 ISO for him. So Beltran makes a little bit of sense where he's still cheap. I think he's somebody that you can use viable option to throw in there to round out a roster. Next game, we got the Dodgers going up against the Angels in the Battle of Los Angeles. Mike Bolsinger got called up for the Dodgers to pitch here. And left-handed bats have a much higher average against them, except there really are no left-handed bats on the Angels. So the only guy that kind of stands out to me is Mike Trout, 411 WOBA, 289 ISO, even in righty-on-righty situations. So he's definitely somebody I want to have some shares of, and I'll be looking at today. On the other side of the mound, we got Nick Tropiano. Pretty high K rate for Tropiano, but also a high batting average allowed, like 270, 280, both to right and left-handed batters. So, again, he's a guy that's been getting knocked around a little bit. I really like Corey Seager. He's been heating up lately. 377 WOBA, 193 ISO, still hitting in the two-hole there, left-handed bat against the right-handed pitcher. Definitely think I'm going to have some shares of him at shortstop. I also think you can look at Justin Turner, who's been hitting in the three-hole. Adrian Gonzalez left the game 2 games ago with a back injury, sat out last night. So I think Turner's going to be one of those guys that, is going to be asked to pick up the slack like he was last year when he was slotted into the 3 spot in the order. 357 WOBA, 177 ISO for him. He does hit well in righty-on-righty situations. So other than Seager, I think Turner's probably my favorite guy on the Dodgers. Last game today, we got some pretty good pitching on the mound. San Francisco going up against San Diego. We got Johnny Cueto, and right-handed bats 2016 are only hitting about 250 against him with a 1.14 whip. Remember, he pitched against San Diego on April 26th. Through a complete game, gave up 7 hits, 1 walk, no runs, and struck out 11. Put up like a monster 35, 40 fantasy points. So we've already seen him kind of dominate the San Diego lineup. We know the San Diego lineup does not hit right-handed pitching well, and there's really nobody on this team that profiles as somebody I'd be afraid of. So I do think Cueto is in a pretty good spot. On the other side of this game, though, we do have Drew Pomeranz, who has been phenomenal to start the year. 180 ERA, 1.08 whip for him. 51 strikeouts and 40 innings worth of work for the lefty. So I think this is another good spot for him. I don't think it's going to be an easy game for the San Francisco bats. You know, Posey's the one guy who does hit left-handed pitching very well on this team. 370 WOBA, 181 ISO. You know, Belt and Panic are 2 guys that are left-handed, but actually do well in lefty-on-lefty matchups. But again, Pomeranz has been kind of dominant to start the year. So I don't think I'm really going to be looking at any of these San Francisco bats. I think I like Cueto a little more in this game, but if you have Liriano, Cueto, and Pomeranz as your top 3 pitchers on the day, you know, the only reason why I would put Pomeranz below the other 2, excuse me, is because he's probably not likely to get the win. I do think that Cueto winds up winning this game because I just don't see the San Diego team getting to him at all. So that sums it up for the 12-game slate we got today for MLB DFS. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.